What if I told you that being inherently cheap is actually mathematically guaranteed to keep you poor?
Yeah, it sounds totally backward. Right?
It really does. But today, we're basically tearing apart all that conventional wisdom about saving money. We are looking at the actual mechanical architecture of wealth.
Because, you work incredibly hard. You trade 40 hours a week, maybe 50 weeks a year for decades of your life.
Exactly. But the real question is, does your money actually work hard for you?
Right.
Today, we are cracking open this fascinating roadmap to long-term wealth building. And the best part is it's specifically tailored for ordinary people.
Yeah, we're doing a deep dive into an extensive, really highly detailed Arabic language interview. It's centered entirely on personal finance, wealth building, and financial psychology.
Which is such a crucial piece of the puzzle.
It is. The mission here is to map out the exact step-by-step journey from being someone who, struggles to keep a single dollar in their checking account by the end of the month.
We've all been there.
All right, to becoming someone who operates with just unshakable financial freedom. And the source material doesn't approach this from some Wall Street elite perspective.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, it tackles the everyday psychological friction that we all face.
And I think the foundational concept the source establishes before we even look at a single spreadsheet is redefining what wealth actually means to you.
Which is so important.
It completely rejects this cultural image of wealth as luxury. I mean, wealth isn't a private jet or, a garage full of supercars.
No, the source defines wealth purely as options. It is power over your own time.
I love that. Power over your time.
When your financial resources increase, your life choices multiply. You're basically buying back your own autonomy.
And that framing is so essential because if we don't define the target, the mechanics just don't matter.
Exactly. Before we can engineer a portfolio, we have to audit our psychological relationship with money.
Which means confronting some really uncomfortable stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The source directly calls out this pervasive, almost subconscious cultural narrative we have.
You mean the idea that money is somehow inherently corrupting?
Yeah, or that ignoring your finances makes you this, more grounded, noble person.
Oh, right. People use that as a defense mechanism constantly.
All the time. You hear it at dinner parties I'm just not motivated by money. I focus on my art, or I focus on my family.
But the source pulls zero punches here. It points out a really stark reality. If you refuse to manage your money, you eventually become a massive burden to those exact same people.
Wow. Yeah, that hits hard.
It does. You become a liability to your children, to your extended family, and eventually to the social safety net.
So basically, treating money with disdain is a total dereliction of duty.
Exactly. The source frames money neutrally. It's just a wrench.
A wrench. Okay, explain that.
Well, a wrench doesn't have a moral alignment, right?
Yeah.
You can use a wrench to build a community center.
Or you can use it to smash a window.
Right. Money provides stability. It provides this buffer against the random chaos of life. And if we accept that it is literally just a tool, we have to look at the catastrophic ways people misuse it every day.
Which brings us back to my opening question about, being cheap.
Yes, the cheap versus economical debate.
Right. The source draws this incredibly sharp distinction between being economical and just being cheap or stingy. And it's not just a matter of semantics, is it?
Not at all. It is a divide that literally dictates your long-term net worth. It all comes down to the fundamental difference between price and value.
Okay, so break that down for us. What does the cheap person do?
So a cheap person operates with severe tunnel vision. They only look at the immediate sticker price.
Just whatever's cheapest right this second.
Exactly. Whereas an economical person calculates the total cost of ownership. But let's look at the classic example of buying a car, which really reflects the logic presented in the source.
I feel like everyone has made a mistake here at least once.
Oh, for sure. A cheap person will hunt down the absolute lowest priced vehicle on the market. Maybe it's a notoriously unreliable model with 100,000 miles on it.
Right.
They pay $4,000 in cash and feel this huge rush of dopamine because they think they beat the system today.
But the math catches up with them almost instantly, right?
Always. Over the next 3 years, that car needs a new transmission, constant brake repairs, endless towing fees.
And more importantly, it leaves them stranded. They miss shifts at work, or maybe they bomb a job interview because they're stuck on the highway.
Exactly. And when the engine finally cracks completely, the asset's residual value is zero. It's worth nothing.
Meanwhile, what does the economical person do?
The economical person might spend, say, $15,000 on a vehicle that is renowned for extreme engineering reliability.
Something with low maintenance costs and a really slow depreciation curve.
Right. Now, the initial capital outlay is obviously much higher, and that creates psychological friction today.
It hurts to spend $15,000 instead of $4,000.
It does. But over a 10-year horizon, the economical person spends vastly less capital than the cheap person, because the economical person is paying for peace of mind, and they're preserving the asset's eventual resale value.
So the cheap person is entirely blinded by the immediate dopamine hit of a low sticker price.
Exactly.
Whereas the economical person is willing to endure a higher upfront cost because they're actually calculating the long-term utility.
Right, they see the whole board, not just the single move.
Okay, but let me challenge this slightly. Because the source makes it sound like, well, once you realize money is a tool and you focus on value, you just organically start saving.
Which we know isn't true.
Right. Saving is biologically unnatural. Saving money without a highly specific emotional goal is like running on a treadmill in a dark room.
That is a great analogy.
Right. You're sweating, your heart is pounding, it hurts, but you have zero visual feedback on your progress. Eventually, the pain just outweighs the theory and you step off the machine.
And that friction you're describing, it's a documented behavioral economics concept. It's known as present bias.
Present bias, or I guess casually, the YOLO effect. You only live once.
Exactly, the YOLO effect. And we really shouldn't feel guilty for experiencing it, because our neurology is literally wired for immediate consumption.
Piece of evolution, right.
Right. For hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution, caloric security was non-existent.
So if a hunter-gatherer found a bush full of berries, the absolute optimal survival strategy was to eat every single berry right then and there.
Because there was no refrigerator. If you saved the berries for next week, they either rotted or some competitor from another tribe stole them.
Wow, so we are literally the descendants of the people who consumed the fastest.
We are. We're operating this insanely complex modern financial system using Paleolithic hardware. Our brains prioritize immediate comfort over abstract future security.
So how do we bypass that? Because we can't just change our DNA.
To bypass this evolutionary roadblock, the source suggests a really powerful mental model. You have to treat your future self as a distinct, entirely separate human being.
Wait, really? Like a stranger?
Yeah. There are actually functional MRI studies that back this up.
Oh, I think I've heard of this.
Yeah, when people think about their future selves, the parts of the brain that light up are the exact same regions that activate when they're thinking about a complete stranger.
That is wild. We literally perceived the 65-year-old version of ourselves as someone else entirely.
Which is exactly why the source's framing is so incredibly effective. If you view your future self as a stranger, you have to consciously choose to make that stranger a beloved friend.
Oh, I see.
When you divert money into an investment account, you are not depriving your current self. You are sending a care package through time to an older, potentially more tired, more vulnerable person that you care deeply about.
That completely shifts the act of saving from a narrative of like self-deprivation to a narrative of immense generosity.
Exactly. It feels good to be generous.
I love that cognitive shift. So, okay, if we've successfully rewired our brain to want to send money to the future, how do we mechanically capture that capital?
The execution phase.
Right, because wanting to save and actually saving are two entirely different universes. The source describes saving as the raw fuel for the wealth engine, right?
Yes. If you don't capture the fuel, the engine never turns over. You just stall out.
So what's the blueprint for capturing the fuel?
The source leans on a framework that was heavily inspired by that classic financial text, The Richest Man in Babylon. They implement what's called the 70-20-10 rule.
The 70-20-10.
Yeah. It is a very rigid, totally non-negotiable blueprint for your income allocation.
Okay, walk us through the numbers.
You allocate exactly 70% of your net income to your living expenses. That's housing, food, utilities, transportation.
All the basics.
Right. Then you deploy 20% toward aggressive debt elimination. Or, if you are lucky enough to be debt-free, that 20% goes straight into wealth-building investments.
Okay, and the last 10%?
The final 10% is an ironclad allocation strictly for liquid savings.
Okay, let's look at the mechanics of living on that 70%. Because honestly, In a high inflation environment with just soaring housing costs, capping your life at 70% of your take-home pay requires absolute ruthlessness.
It does. It's not easy.
If you bring home $5,000 a month, the math dictates you survive on $3,500. And for a lot of people, rent alone eats up $2,000 of that.
Right, which leaves you $1,500 for literally everything else. It forces you to aggressively audit your lifestyle.
And I feel like that aggressive audit is exactly where people fail if they just rely on willpower alone.
Willpower is a trap. Willpower is actually a depleting biological resource. It literally drains as the day goes on.
Which is why diets always fail at 9 p.m., not 9 a.m.
Exactly. The source knows this, which is why they fiercely advocate for zero-based budgeting, specifically through automation.
Automation is key.
If you are the type of person who looks at a checking account with $5,000 in it, and subconsciously finds a way to spend exactly $5,000.
Which is most of us, let's be honest.
Right. You have to remove your own agency from the equation entirely.
You set up the plumbing beforehand.
Yes. So that the precise second your paycheck hits your account on Friday morning, the 20% for investments and the 10% for savings are instantly automatically routed to completely separate financial institutions.
You never even see the money.
Never. When you log into your banking app on Friday afternoon, your balance just says $3,500.
You are engineering artificial scarcity.
You're tricking your inner hunter-gatherer. If the berries aren't on the bush, you can't eat them.
That makes so much sense. Because if that $1,500 is sitting in your primary checking account, Parkinson's law of triviality just takes over.
Oh, instantly. You will find a completely rational-sounding justification to spend it.
A sudden urge to upgrade your phone, or a spontaneous weekend trip, or an expensive dinner.
Speaking of expensive dinners, this is exactly where the source brings up the infamous latte factor.
Oh boy, the latte factor.
Yeah, and they anchor it with that famous Benjamin Franklin quote, "Take care of the pence, and the pounds will take care of themselves."
Okay, I have to push back on the cultural interpretation of this, because I think a lot of financial gurus use the $5 coffee as like this condescending weapon against ordinary people.
They absolutely do.
Mathematically, giving up a $5 daily coffee is not going to magically conjure a $100,000 down payment for a house in today's real estate market. It's just not.
You're totally right. The mathematics of the $5 coffee are a massive distraction if you view them in isolation.
So why does the source bring it up?
Because the source uses the latte factor as a proxy for systemic, unmonitored financial leakage. It's not just the coffee.
It's the coffee compounded by the 4 streaming services you barely watch.
Yes, and the $40 monthly gym membership you literally haven't used since January.
And all those premium app subscriptions that auto-renew silently in the background on your phone.
Plus the habit of ordering delivery food 3 nights a week simply because you didn't plan your groceries.
It really is death by 1,000 microtransactions.
It is. When you actually force someone to print out 3 months of bank statements and physically highlight every single non-essential recurring charge with a marker,
People are usually shocked.
they are horrified. The frictionless modern economy is siphoning hundreds of dollars a month from their wealth engine without them even noticing.
And redirecting that systemic leakage is truly life-altering over a multi-decade horizon.
Completely. But to make that audit less agonizing, the source suggests deploying gamification.
Gamification. Turning it into a game.
Exactly. Human beings are deeply motivated by games, by overcoming artificial constraints and by achieving high scores.
Because if you tell yourself you are on a strict budget, you just feel punished, you feel poor.
Right. But if you challenge yourself to a no-spend weekend, suddenly you feel like a competitor.
I've tried a no-spend weekend. It completely resets your dopamine baseline.
How so?
Well, you decree that from Friday night to Monday morning, 0 capital leaves your possession. You are forced to find free utility. You go for a hike, you read physical books you've already purchased, you cook meals using literally only the random ingredients buried in the back of your pantry.
It forces immense creativity.
It really does.
And it breaks the neurological link between consumption and entertainment. Plus, utilizing visual tracking apps turns saving money into a tangible high score.
Which hits that same dopamine receptor.
However, the expert in the source issues a really severe counter warning right here.
Uh-oh. What's the warning?
While gamifying frugality is incredibly powerful, they explicitly warn against saving too much.
Wait, what?
Yeah. They advise generally capping your savings rate at 50% of your income, even if you are like a super high earner striving for extreme early retirement.
That sounds completely counterintuitive. I mean, if the objective is to buy back your time and achieve financial freedom, why wouldn't you save 80% if your massive income allows it?
Because you are a biological organism subject to psychological burnout. Extreme deprivation is the financial equivalent of a crash diet.
Oh, like when someone only eats celery for a week.
Exactly. If you restrict a person to eating nothing but cabbage soup for 3 weeks, their willpower eventually fractures and they will consume an entire chocolate cake in a fugue state.
Right, the rebound effect.
If you live in a dark room, eat rice and beans, and decline literally every single social invitation for 5 years just to hit a savings goal, you will snap.
You'll just abandon the architecture entirely.
You'll go on a catastrophic spending binge just to self-soothe. Sustainability always scales better than intensity.
You have to build pressure release valves into the system.
Yes. The source insists on a dedicated entertainment fund, money that is explicitly ring-fenced for guilt-free consumption.
So you buy the concert tickets, you go to the incredible restaurant, but you execute those actions strictly from that allocated fund?
Exactly. The wealth journey has to be tolerable, or you will eventually sabotage it.
Okay, so we have the psychology dialed in. We are automating the extraction of our 10% savings and our 20% investment fuel.
We are.
But before we deploy that fuel into the stock market, the source introduces a mandatory prerequisite.
The financial moat.
The emergency fund.
Yes. You cannot mount an offensive campaign until your defensive perimeter is impenetrable.
So let's define the parameters of this moat, because we aren't talking about money tied up in retirement accounts or home equity, right?
No, absolutely not. The source defines the emergency fund as your own personal bank that operates at 0% interest.
Highly liquid cash.
Exactly. Sitting in a boring, totally accessible savings account, just waiting for a crisis.
And how big should this moat be?
The sizing is heavily dependent on your personal risk exposure. The source offers a bifurcated rule here. If you operate in an environment with extreme job security, like you're a tenured teacher or a government employee, where layoffs are basically a statistical anomaly.
Very safe jobs.
Right. Then your moat only needs to hold enough cash to cover 3 months of essential living expenses.
Essential being the operative word there. We aren't calculating 3 months of our entertainment fund or our vacation budget.
No, definitely not. We are calculating the bare minimum required to keep the landlord paid, the electricity on, and calories in our bodies.
Okay, what about everyone else?
If your income generation is volatile, like if you work in the private sector where corporations do massive random layoffs, or if you are a freelancer or a business owner,
Your exposure is exponentially higher.
the source demands a moat covering 6 to 8 months of essential expenses for those individuals.
Okay, I have to pause here and address the macroeconomic reality, because anyone paying attention to the news is screaming at their speakers right now.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
We live in an era of persistent inflation. The purchasing power of fiat currency decays every single year.
It does.
So if inflation is humming at, say, 3% or 4%, holding $30,000 in a checking account for 8 months is mathematically guaranteeing a loss of purchasing power.
It's slowly evaporating.
Right. The cash is evaporating. Why on earth would we accept a guaranteed loss?
That is the most frequent and most logical objection to the emergency fund concept. But it stems from a fundamental miscategorization of what the money actually is.
Oh, so.
The source clarifies this perfectly. The emergency fund is absolutely not an investment. You are not trying to generate a yield on this money.
It's an insurance product that you underwrite yourself.
Exactly. Let's examine the actual mechanics of insurance. When you pay a premium for a comprehensive auto insurance policy, you don't complain at the end of the year that your premium didn't generate an 8% compounding return, do you?
Well, no. I'm just glad I didn't crash my car.
Right. You understand that the money was the cost of transferring catastrophic risk away from yourself?
Yeah. Ah, I see.
The inflation drag on your emergency fund is literally just the premium you pay to protect your actual investments from forced liquidation.
Let's play out the disaster scenario where you don't have the moat. Let's say you decide you are way smarter than the source, so you take all your liquid cash and dump it into the S&P 500.
Okay, classic mistake.
You are feeling like an absolute genius because the market is up 10% this year.
But macroeconomic disasters don't happen in a vacuum, right? They correlate.
Exactly. The economy contracts sharply, the stock market plunges 35%. And because the economy is contracting, your company suddenly restructures and your position is eliminated.
The correlation is what destroys people. Now you have zero cash flow, a mortgage payment due in 2 weeks, and perhaps a sudden medical crisis induced by the sheer stress of the situation.
And because you have no liquid cash moat, you have zero options.
Zero. You are forced to log into your brokerage account and sell your index funds just to buy groceries.
But you are selling them at the absolute bottom of a 35% market crash.
You are locking in a massive permanent destruction of capital.
Ouch. So the emergency fund acts as a shock absorber.
Precisely. It absorbs the impact of the job loss, allowing your equities to remain totally untouched, giving them the years they need to recover and compound.
So the inflation you suffer on the cash is completely negligible compared to a 35% forced liquidation.
It's a bargain, honestly.
Okay, so with the defensive perimeter totally secured, the source finally permits us to go on the offensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
We transition from preserving wealth to multiplying it.
Because saving money in a vacuum guarantees you will never be wealthy. Inflation will always outpace your raw labor.
You need what the source vividly calls savings on steroids.
I love that phrase. And the mechanism providing those steroids is compound interest.
The eighth wonder of the world, as they say.
Right. Now, the common metaphor here is a snowball rolling down a hill, picking up more snow as it goes. But honestly, I think a much better mechanical analogy for compounding is a turbocharger on an engine.
Oh, I like that. Explain the turbocharger.
Well, a standard naturally aspirated engine just burns fuel and pushes the exhaust out the back. It's wasted energy. But a turbocharger takes that exhaust, the waste energy, or in our case, the interest and the dividends, and routes it forcefully back into the engine's intake.
So you're reusing the byproduct.
Exactly. You're using the byproduct of the engine to force more oxygen into the combustion chamber, which creates an exponential increase in horsepower.
That is a highly accurate mechanical representation of finance. If you generate a 7% dividend and you withdraw that dividend to spend it on a vacation, your engine never scales.
You are running naturally aspirated forever.
Right. But if you auto-reinvest the dividend to buy more shares of the underlying asset, your principal base expands. Next quarter, you earn 7% on a larger principal.
You are earning interest on your interest.
And over a multi-decade timeline, the curve of that growth goes from linear to completely vertical.
To help listeners actually quantify the speed of that turbocharger, the source introduces one of the most elegant mathematical heuristics in all of finance.
The rule of 72.
Yes. You don't need a complex spreadsheet to figure out how fast your wealth is scaling.
The rule of 72 is brilliant. It allows you to instantly calculate the doubling time of any investment based on a fixed annual rate of return.
How does the math work?
You simply take the number 72 and divide it by the promised interest rate. The quotient is the exact number of years it will take for your capital to double.
Okay, let's run a realistic scenario. Say you invest in a broad market index fund that historically averages around a 10% annual return.
Okay, so you take 72 divided by 10 and you get 7.2.
So every 7.2 years, your money doubles.
Exactly. If you deploy $20,000 today, in roughly 7 years, you have $40,000.
In 14 years, $80,000.
In 21 years, $160,000. That is the turbocharger spooling up.
It's incredibly powerful. But the source deploys the Rule of 72 for a much more critical defensive purpose, right?
Yes. It is the ultimate bullshit detector for financial scams.
Because human greed totally blinds us to mathematics. People are constantly pitched these shady private equity deals or crypto staking pools or Forex trading algorithms that promise these guaranteed returns of 40% or 50% a year.
Right, and people fall for it. But just apply the rule. 72 divided by 50 is 1.44.
Okay.
The promoter is claiming they have a vehicle that will reliably double your money every 17 months.
Which is insane.
If that mechanism actually existed, the promoter wouldn't be begging you for your $10,000 on Instagram.
Exactly. They would borrow $1 billion from a syndicate of investment banks at 6%, deploy it into their magic machine, and become the wealthiest entity on planet Earth in a decade. The math instantly exposes the fraud. Any promised risk-free return above 10 to 15% should trigger massive alarms in your head.
Without a doubt.
So we understand the physics of compounding, and we know how to spot a lie. But what are the actual legitimate vehicles we should be routing our fuel into?
The source opens this discussion with a foundational golden rule of capital deployment. Invest only in what you fundamentally understand.
Which seems obvious, but it is a rule violated daily by incredibly intelligent people.
It's the curse of domain expertise.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Like an orthopedic surgeon. They spend 20 years mastering the human skeletal system. They make a massive income.
But because they are a literal genius in the operating room, their ego convinces them they are also a genius in global macroeconomics.
Yes. So instead of buying simple, boring assets, they start day trading, leverage, tech derivatives they barely comprehend simply because a colleague mentioned it at the golf course.
The source makes it crystal clear that deploying capital into systems you cannot explain to a child is not investing. It is gambling, just wrapped up in financial jargon.
So what's the actual progression they recommend?
The source outlines a very pragmatic progression of asset complexity. It starts at the absolute floor with basic savings accounts,
Offering maximum liquidity and safety, but yields that inevitably lose to inflation.
Right. Then you step up to fixed deposits or certificates of deposit, CDs.
You're agreeing to lock your capital away for 12 or 24 months, sacrificing liquidity in exchange for a slightly higher guaranteed yield from the bank?
It's safe, but again, it's not going to make you rich. To generate real wealth, you have to accept volatility and step up to equities, specifically index funds.
And the source exhibits a very strong preference for the U.S. stock market here due to its historic structural resilience.
They cite Warren Buffett's behavior during the terrifying early days of the COVID-19 pandemic.
That was a wild time. The global economy was literally shutting down, supply chains were freezing, and the market was in absolute free fall.
And yet, Buffett was historically calm. He wasn't panicking at all.
Why?
Because his thesis is built on the macroeconomic resilience of the American economic engine. He trusts the system to innovate its way out of any disaster.
Let's look at the underlying mechanics of why an S&P 500 index fund is so structurally sound compared to, say, picking individual stocks.
Most active fund managers, people who are paid literally millions of dollars to analyze individual companies, fail to beat the basic index over a 20-year horizon.
Which is mind-blowing.
The index fund doesn't try to guess who will win. It simply buys a weighted slice of the 500 largest companies.
It's essentially financial Darwinism. It's a self-cleansing mechanism.
Exactly.
If a massive company becomes obsolete, say, a giant video rental chain that just completely ignores streaming, its market cap shrinks and it naturally falls out of the index.
And the new innovative streaming company that takes its place automatically enters the index. You don't have to monitor it.
The index systematically prunes the losers and acquires the winners.
You are harnessing the aggregate output of the largest corporate entities on Earth.
It's brilliant. Now, the next vehicle the source explores is real estate. Physical real estate is often viewed as the holy grail of wealth because it is tangible, scarce, and historically it appreciates.
But the friction of entry is absolutely massive.
It requires huge capital reserves for a down payment. You have to take on decades of highly leveraged debt through a mortgage.
And then you are burdened with the operational nightmare of property management.
Right. You are the one getting the phone call at 3 a.m. when a pipe bursts in the tenant's ceiling.
To capture the yield of real estate without that operational nightmare, the source recommends REITs, real estate investment trusts.
Explain the legal mechanics of a REIT, because this is where a lot of people get really confused. How can a stock act like real estate?
A REIT is a highly specialized corporate structure. You pool your capital with millions of other retail investors to purchase massive commercial cash-flowing assets that you could never afford individually.
Like what?
Skyscrapers, data centers, regional hospital buildings, massive apartment complexes.
Okay, so you own a tiny slice of a skyscraper.
Yes, but the crucial mechanic is the tax law. To maintain their legal status as a REIT and to avoid paying standard corporate income tax, the entity is mandated by law to distribute at least 90% of its taxable income directly to shareholders in the form of dividends.
So the rent checks collected from that massive data center or the hospital flow almost entirely directly into your brokerage account.
Often yielding 4% or 5% annually, completely separate from whatever the share price is doing.
You are a landlord, but you have zero operational responsibility.
And you have complete liquidity. You can sell your entire stake on a Tuesday afternoon with the click of a button, whereas selling a physical house takes months of agonizing paperwork.
It is a highly efficient vehicle for regular people to get commercial real estate exposure.
Very much so.
Now we have to address this. The source also tackles the two most polarizing assets in modern finance: gold and cryptocurrency.
Yes, they do. And as impartial analysts of this source material, we must report their specific, highly critical philosophy on these assets.
Right, which is rooted in their demand for predictable producing portfolios. Let's start with gold. It's been the default store of value for thousands of years. Why does the source reject it as a primary wealth vehicle?
The source analyzes gold strictly through the lens of production. Gold is a highly inert, non-producing asset.
If you buy a bar of gold and place it in a vault, it literally just sits there.
It does not hire employees. It does not manufacture a product. It does not innovate, and it never pays you a dividend.
So your entire thesis for profit relies entirely on the hope that a decade from now, market fear will drive someone else to pay you a higher price for the exact same inert metal.
Exactly. Furthermore, the source touches upon the mechanics of Islamic finance here. In that framework, hoarding idle, non-producing assets like gold can incur zakat.
Which is an annual wealth tax.
Right. That tax creates a mechanical drag on the asset. If the asset isn't generating a yield to cover the tax, the gold essentially slowly consumes itself.
And the source applies a very similar fundamental critique to cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin, right?
The underlying argument is exactly the same. Lack of intrinsic cash flow.
Because when you acquire shares in an index fund, you own a fractional piece of global logistics networks, pharmaceutical patents, and software monopolies that generate trillions in actual measurable profit.
But when you buy Bitcoin, according to the source's framework, you are simply exchanging fiat currency for a digital token governed by code.
The token itself doesn't produce quarterly earnings.
Right. Your return on investment is entirely predicated on the greater fool theory.
The assumption that you can sell it to a quote-unquote greater fool at a higher fiat price in the future.
Now, the source is not denying that massive fortunes have been made trading crypto volatility. They aren't saying it hasn't happened.
But their architecture is built on highly predictable, cash-flowing stability.
Speculative assets that rely solely on price action just do not fit their blueprint for a portfolio that allows you to sleep peacefully during a deep recession.
It's a vital distinction. You are building an engine, not placing a bet on a roulette wheel. But let's look at what actually destroys that engine. Building a robust portfolio of index funds and REITs takes decades of relentless discipline, yet the source makes it chillingly clear that you can vaporize 20 years of wealth in 20 months if you fall prey to the wealth destroyers.
And the most lethal destroyer is bad debt.
Debt is leverage, and leverage amplifies outcomes. Now, the source is not absolutist. They don't say all debt is evil, do they?
No, they define a strict framework of 3 acceptable debts.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is a true catastrophic emergency. We're talking a life or death medical crisis where your liquid mode has been completely drained and you literally must borrow to survive.
Understood. What's the second acceptable debt?
The second is leveraging capital for a high probability business venture.
Yeah.
Say you are borrowing money from a bank at 7% to buy commercial equipment that will objectively increase your business revenue by 20%.
You are utilizing the spread between the cost of capital and the return on capital. That's just smart business.
Exactly. And the third is acquiring a primary residence.
Which makes sense. Given the astronomical cost of modern housing, saving 100% of the purchase price in cash is mathematically impossible for most wage earners.
A mortgage, typically structured over 30 years at a manageable fixed rate, is just a necessary utility to secure shelter and fix your housing costs against future inflation.
But if it doesn't fall into one of those 3 exact buckets, emergencies, business leverage, or a primary mortgage, the source classifies the debt as toxic waste.
Total toxic waste, and they direct intense fury at the normalization of microdebt.
Oh, you mean the buy now, pay later industry? BNPL.
Yes, that is integrated into almost literally every single online checkout screen today.
The BNPL phenomenon is a behavioral psychology nightmare.
It truly is. You are buying a $60 pair of sneakers online, and the algorithm politely offers to split it into 4 bi-weekly payments of $15.
Who is financing a pair of sneakers? And more importantly, why is it so dangerous if they claim it's 0 interest?
It is dangerous because it absolutely hacks the neurological pathways of consumption.
How so?
In a normal physical transaction, handing over cash triggers the insula in the human brain. The insula is the exact region associated with physical pain and disgust.
So spending money literally registers as pain.
Yes, the pain of parting with resources acts as a biological brake system. It forces cognitive friction. You hold the $60 in your hand, you look at the shoes, and your brain runs an instant cost-benefit analysis.
But by now, pay later systems are engineered by behavioral scientists to intentionally sever that connection. They separate the joy of acquisition from the pain of payment.
You get the immediate dopamine rush of the sneakers arriving in the mail, but you defer all the financial pain to a future version of yourself.
And by entirely removing the cognitive friction, you trigger a cascade of impulsive consumption.
Because a consumer doesn't just do this once. They finance the sneakers, then they finance the headphones, then the concert tickets, then a dinner out.
Suddenly, their entire monthly cash flow is cannibalized by dozens of microloans.
They have mortgaged their future labor to fund momentary thrills, and their wealth engine stalls completely.
This decoupling of pain and pleasure leads directly to another psychological trap outlined by the source, which revolves around an incredible historical anecdote.
The Diderot effect.
Yes, it perfectly illustrates how consumption operates like a virus. Tell the story of Denis Diderot.
So, Denis Diderot was a highly respected but relatively impoverished French philosopher in the 18th century. He lived a very simple, coherent life in a modest, humble apartment. His possessions were battered but functional.
Right.
One day, a wealthy patron, Catherine the Great of Russia, actually heard of his financial struggles and gifted him a massive sum of money.
An unexpected massive influx of liquid capital.
Diderot, wanting to enjoy his newfound wealth just a little bit, went out and purchased a stunning, luxurious scarlet robe. It was made of the finest material. He was thrilled.
But then what happened?
When he brought the beautiful robe home and sat in his study, a psychological dissonance occurred.
The environment no longer matched the asset.
Precisely. His old, battered wooden desk suddenly looked grotesque, sitting next to the sheer elegance of the scarlet robe. The aesthetic cohesion of his entire life was broken.
So to fix it, he spent more of his windfall on a beautiful new desk.
But once the desk was installed, the threadbare rug on the floor looked pathetic. So he purchased a luxurious rug.
The cascade begins.
Then the chairs had to be replaced. Then the artwork on the walls. Diderot fell into a relentless spiral of upgrading every single item in his life to match the arbitrary standards set by the scarlet robe.
And the result?
He completely exhausted the massive windfall and drove himself right back into crippling debt.
The Diderot effect is the sociological reality that the acquisition of a new possession often creates a spiral of consumption which leads you to acquire more new things.
We see this constantly today.
All the time. You get a slight bump in salary, so you finance a luxury SUV. But pulling a $70,000 car into the parking lot of a rundown apartment building causes psychological dissonance.
So you upgrade to a luxury apartment.
But you can't put your old IKEA furniture in a luxury apartment, so you finance high-end furniture.
You are engaging in an endless treadmill of aesthetic escalation. It is the purest definition of lifestyle creep.
And the source anchors this with Parkinson's law, which states that work expands to fill the time available.
Right, but when applied to personal finance, Parkinson's law dictates that expenses will always expand to match the income available.
If a household makes $60,000, they find a way to spend exactly $60,000.
And if they get promotions and suddenly make $150,000, they mysteriously discover $150,000 worth of quote-unquote essential needs.
This is exactly why there are doctors and corporate lawyers making $500,000 a year who are living paycheck to paycheck, terrified of missing a single billing cycle.
It's terrifying.
So to defeat Parkinson's law and immunize yourself against the Diderot effect, the source provides a highly mechanical solution.
The 50% rule.
What is the 50% rule?
It is a strict protocol for handling any influx of new capital. Whenever you receive a raise, a bonus, or an unexpected windfall, you must immediately, before your brain even has time to adjust to the new baseline, divert exactly 50% of that new net income directly into your investment vehicles.
So if my take-home pay increases by $1,000 a month, I do not increase my standard of living by $1,000.
No. You set up an automated routing system that sends $500 straight into your S&P 500 index fund. You are only permitted to inflate your lifestyle with the remaining $500.
It is a brilliant psychological compromise. It starves Parkinson's law by removing the excess liquidity from your checking account.
It massively accelerates the compounding of your wealth engine.
But it avoids the burnout of extreme deprivation because you still get to feel a tangible reward for your career progression.
Exactly. You're constantly trying to hack your own flawed wetware.
Which brings us to the most vital part of the deep dive. Surviving the Diderot effect, avoiding BNPL traps, and executing the 50% rule requires way more than just knowing the math.
It requires an entirely new mental operating system. We have to patch the bugs in how we make decisions.
And the most critical bug we suffer from is decision fatigue. The source leans heavily on the research of Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman here, particularly from his seminal work, Thinking, Fast and Slow.
Kahneman's work on cognitive bias is absolutely foundational. Let's look at the specific study the source highlights regarding the parole judges.
Because it is genuinely terrifying when you apply it to your own life.
The researchers analyzed the rulings of judges presiding over parole hearings in a penal system. These are highly trained, rational actors weighing incredibly complex legal evidence.
Right.
The researchers tracked the outcomes of the cases based solely on the time of day the hearing occurred, and they discovered a massive systemic flaw. A prisoner whose case was heard first thing in the morning had a significantly high probability of being granted parole.
But as the day progressed, the favorable rulings plummeted. Were the prisoners scheduled in the afternoon statistically more dangerous?
Not at all. The case scheduling was completely randomized. The only variable changing was the glucose levels and cognitive load in the judges' brains.
Making high-stakes decisions, evaluating risk, weighing evidence, suppressing bias requires a massive amount of metabolic energy.
By 3 p.m., the judges were suffering from severe decision fatigue. Their brains were depleted.
And when the human brain is depleted, it defaults to the path of least resistance.
In the context of a parole hearing, the path of least resistance, the safest, easiest choice that requires the least justification, is to just deny parole and keep the status quo.
The implications for personal finance are profound. Every day, you wake up with a finite reservoir of high-quality decision-making energy.
If you burn through that reservoir in the morning, agonizing over what outfit to wear, scrolling through combative social media threads, and answering 80 trivial emails,
your cognitive battery is empty by 6 p.m.
So when you sit down at 6:30 p.m. to review your monthly budget, or analyze a new investment property, or just decide whether to cook or order a $40 delivery meal, you are operating with the exact same brain as a fatigued parole judge.
You will take the easy way out. You will order the food, you will ignore the budget, you will abandon the financial architecture because it's just too hard.
To counteract this, the source prescribes a strategy famously called Eat the Frog, popularized by productivity experts.
If you know you have to eat a live frog today, do it the absolute moment you wake up.
Then no matter what happens the rest of the day, the worst is over.
You must execute your highest leverage, most complex financial analysis first thing in the morning. Rebalance your portfolio while you drink your first coffee.
Calculate your zero-based budget before you open a single email.
You are deploying your freshest, highest quality cognitive cycles toward building your wealth rather than wasting them on the trivialities of your inbox.
Another severe cognitive bug the source addresses is confirmation bias.
Our innate tendency to aggressively seek out information that validates our pre-existing beliefs, while subconsciously ignoring or attacking data that contradicts us.
If I decide I desperately want to buy a specific electric vehicle, I will suddenly only click on articles praising its acceleration and its design.
And you will completely scroll past the forum posts detailing catastrophic battery failures, telling yourself those users are just haters.
We do this with investments constantly. We fall in love with a stock ticker, and we only read the bullish analysts.
So how do we debug this?
To debug this, the source highlights the mental models of Charlie Munger, the brilliant longtime business partner of Warren Buffett. Munger was legendary for a cognitive tool he called inversion.
Inversion.
When Munger found an investment opportunity that he thought was spectacular, he didn't look for data to confirm his brilliance. He actively, aggressively tried to destroy his own thesis.
He put on the black hat and played the role of a short seller against his own idea.
He asked himself, if I wanted to bankrupt this company in 5 years, exactly how would I do it? What macroeconomic shocks would destroy their supply chain? Which competitor has the capacity to crush their margins?
He forced his brain to seek out the negative data.
Only if the investment survived his own ruthless intellectual assault would he actually deploy capital. It is a mandatory protocol for overriding our natural optimism.
That requires an incredible amount of intellectual humility. Now, shifting from the high-level psychology to the purely practical, the source introduces a tool for the operating system that feels almost archaic in the modern era.
The physical pen and paper.
In an ecosystem completely dominated by automated budgeting APIs, AI-driven dashboards, and frictionless mobile banking, advocating for a physical notebook seems really contrarian.
It does.
I can open an app and see my net worth updated in real time down to the penny. Why does the source want me writing things down like a 19th century clerk?
Because of the neurological weight of tactile engagement. The Force argues that our digital ecosystem is inherently ephemeral.
You swipe a notification away in a fraction of a millisecond. A tweet vanishes down a timeline.
When numbers just live as pixels on a screen, they lack gravity. But the physical act of grasping a pen and writing out your financial goals, your budget deficits, or your anxieties forces a cognitive slowdown.
You can't skim when you write. You are forced to physically process the numbers. Furthermore, the source discusses how writing externalizes generalized anxiety.
Oh, this is huge.
When you are stressed about debt, the fear just bounces around inside your skull, amorphous and terrifying. It feels infinite.
But when you actually write down the exact dollar amount of the debt on a piece of paper, you trap the fear on the page.
It transforms from an infinite terror into a finite, solvable mathematical problem.
The source notes that Leonardo da Vinci's physical notebooks, filled with erratic calculations, engineering sketches, and personal thoughts, have survived for half a millennium.
There is a permanence and a psychological grounding in physical documentation that an app simply cannot replicate.
Speaking of reading and writing, the source's final upgrade to the operating system is curating your informational inputs. They demand that you read, but they make a very specific recommendation.
Prioritize biographies and historical narratives over dry academic financial textbooks.
They specifically cite Phil Knight's memoir, Shoe Dog, about the chaotic founding of Nike.
Why a biography over a textbook?
A textbook gives you the sterile mathematics of business. It gives you formulas for calculating compound interest or debt-to-equity ratios.
But a biography gives you the human operating reality.
Exactly. When you read Shoe Dog, you aren't just learning about the footwear market. You are reading about a man who was routinely weeks away from total bankruptcy.
Struggling with immense stress, fighting predatory banks, and desperately trying to keep a fragile system from collapsing.
It normalizes the psychological terror of building wealth. When you hit a roadblock in your own financial journey, say your emergency fund is wiped out by an unexpected medical bill, if you only read textbooks, you feel like you failed the formula.
But if you read biographies, you realize that catastrophic setbacks are the standard operating procedure for literally every successful person in history.
It builds resilience.
And that resilience is mandatory because we are finally arriving at the ultimate purpose of this entire architecture. All of the sacrifice, the 70-20-10 rule, eating the frog, combating the Diderot effect, aggressively compounding capital, it is all building toward a singular, definitive endgame.
The endgame is financial freedom.
And the source strips away all the mystical guru lifestyle nonsense surrounding this term. They define it with brutal mathematical clarity.
The ability to live your life normally without the need to work.
The operative word is need. It is not about stopping work. It is about severing the compulsion to work for basic survival.
It is a simple mathematical equation. Your annual passive income must be greater than or equal to your annual expenses. That is the finish line.
Let's run a simplified simulation of that equation. You deploy the operating system, you audit your life, you conquer the Diderot effect, you embrace a level of minimalism, and you determine that your household requires $60,000 a year to live a comfortable, normal, dignified life.
That $60,000 is your ceiling. Now you examine your wealth engine. You look at the dividends from your REITs, the yield from your index funds, the interest from your fixed deposits.
Let's say currently that engine generates $15,000 a year while you sleep.
You have a $45,000 gap. The entire game of personal finance, the culmination of everything we have discussed, is simply the relentless pursuit of closing that specific gap.
And you attack it from both sides simultaneously.
You lower the ceiling by optimizing your tax strategy, eliminating every ounce of bad debt, and refusing to let your lifestyle creep up when your salary increases. You ruthlessly defend the $60,000 line.
Simultaneously, you raise the floor. You funnel every spare dollar into the compounding engine, routing the turbocharger back into the intake.
And the day the math crosses, the day your engine generates $60,001, the game changes permanently.
But I want to pose a philosophical question here. If you close the gap and you wake up on a Tuesday morning and you literally do not have to log into a Zoom call or commute to an office, don't you just spiral into a void of boredom? Doesn't the struggle give us meaning?
That is the ultimate existential hurdle of the FIRE movement. Financial independence, retire early.
Right.
The expert in the source makes it unequivocally clear that achieving financial freedom does not mean you are condemned to sit on a beach staring at the ocean for 40 years. That is a recipe for cognitive decline and deep depression.
So what is the actual reality of crossing the finish line?
The reality is that you have unlocked the highest possible tier of human optionality. You have fundamentally shifted your existence from a defensive posture of survival to an offensive posture of actualization.
If you are a doctor and you love healing people, you keep going to the hospital, but you do it because you are passionate about the science, not because you are terrified of defaulting on your mortgage.
If hospital administration implements a toxic policy, you have the power to just say, "No, I resign," without a drop of adrenaline in your system, because your baseline survival is secured by your index funds.
You can spend 40 hours a week building a high-risk startup that might fail because the failure won't leave your family homeless.
You can dedicate your life to a charity, or to painting, or to raising your children with absolute presence. Financial freedom is not the termination of your productive life. It is the genesis of your fully autonomous life.
It is the ultimate expression of power over your own time. Let's trace the arc of the massive blueprint we've unpacked today. We started by fundamentally rewiring how we perceive money, treating it as a wrench to build options, and recognizing that prioritizing long-term value over short-term price is the bedrock of wealth.
We established the mechanics of capturing the raw fuel using the non-negotiable 70-20-10 framework, automating our zero-based budget, and plugging the systemic leaks of the latte factor while ensuring we don't burn out by maintaining a dedicated entertainment fund.
We dug the defensive moat, self-underwriting our own insurance policy with a 3 to 8 month cash reserve to protect our portfolio from forced liquidation during correlated macroeconomic disasters.
We ignited the engine of compound interest, utilizing the rule of 72 to gauge our velocity and deflect scams. We deployed that capital strictly into assets we comprehend, favoring the self-cleansing Darwinism of broad U.S. index funds and the tax-advantaged cash flow of real estate investment trusts, while avoiding non-producing speculative assets.
We built defenses against the wealth destroyers, identifying the neurological trap of buy now, pay later schemes, and utilizing the 50% rule to short-circuit Parkinson's law and the aesthetic escalation of the Diderot effect.
And we upgraded our cognitive operating system. We learned to eat the frog, to combat decision fatigue, utilize Munger's inversion to shatter our confirmation bias, and leverage the tactile permanence of pen and paper to externalize our financial anxieties, all while reading the biographies of those who survived the chaos before us.
All of this, every single mechanical and psychological hack, driving relentlessly toward one goal: closing the gap between our passive income and our baseline expenses, to finally buy back our autonomy. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, slightly terrifying thought to ponder on your own.
The transition from the mechanics to the reality.
We spend decades of our lives, and we spent this entire hour obsessing over the intricate machinery of how to accumulate the capital to finally be free. We tweak the spreadsheets, we debate the withdrawal rates, but I want you to ask yourself, if a completely anonymous benefactor wired the exact amount of money needed to close your gap into your account tonight,
Right.
and you woke up tomorrow morning with absolute, unshakable financial freedom, zero obligations, and a totally blank calendar,
Yeah.
what exactly would you do at 9:0 a.m.?
For a lot of people who have tied their entire identity to the struggle, the answer is a horrifying blank space.
Because if you cannot clearly articulate what you would do with a completely free Tuesday morning, you might be furiously sacrificing the best years of your life to fund an existence you haven't even bothered to design yet. Don't let your obsession with building the engine distract you from figuring out where you actually want to drive the car. Take the time to architect the life, even as you build the wealth to pay for it. Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others. Thank you for your support.